Welcome to Career22, a series of videos about the skills we need for a career in the 22nd century. My name is Miguel.
And I'm Milton.
And we are both founders of Ungap Education and also both university professors. The reason we are doing these videos is because after several years teaching and helping and mentoring students to kickstart their careers, we realized that decision making for career choices is one of the most critical and stressful processes in people's life. So that's why we decided to bring you a couple of our learnings about how to start and kickstart your career in a couple of short videos. Okay, so today we have a different topic. So what is our topic today, Milton?
Today we're going to talk about this idea of resilience, or grit, if you want, because we've been observing that successful managers and entrepreneurs and sportsmen have this ability to withstand crisis, to persevere. And we would like to share a few thoughts on this because we think this will be very important for crafting a meaningful and successful career. And if you look into other videos we've been presenting, very often we talk about being flexible, being open, learning, accepting failure. But we think that this shouldn't be misunderstood as taking things lightly, right? And not taking your decisions seriously and not being committed. And that's the combination we're trying to go for here, is that while you are open and flexible and willing to fail and accepting your failures as opportunities to learn and to grow, at the same time, you need to be quite strong-minded and show high levels of perseverance and ability to withstand resistance. If you want to make your career successful. If you want some parallels we can establish with what we know from management science, we can think about the concept of grit. And there's been very interesting research showing that successful leaders combine their humble, meaning that they're also able to learn and they empower people in that process. But they're far more effective when they combine that humility with grit. Another framework that uses a similar concept is this idea of level 5 leadership that Jim Collins talked about in his book From Good to Great. And level 5 leadership is present when leaders show, on one hand, again, humility and what he calls professional will, that ability to persevere and to be fully committed and dedicated. And we think the same holds for when you are going through your professional lives and your career. You need to have that same combination of humility and grit, or professional will, or perseverance. And we think that's very, very important for you to have a successful career.
Yeah, so it's a little bit about you kind of having a strong will, following whatever you like, but also being able to resist whatever comes into your way, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you give us a couple of examples on how resilience and grit are critical in a career environment?
Well, yes. Well, I can recall various examples of people I've come across in my life of good role models, if you want, about leaders that showed perseverance and grit, and how that impacted their success in their careers. I remember very well also the case of an executive that I interviewed a few years ago, and the example was about him having made a plan for his life and his career, and how he wanted to move forward, and how he faced a crisis that happened in the company, and him saying that I had a plan to move on at this stage, But this came around, the crisis creeped in, and I needed to make a choice, and I thought that I needed to stay in the organization to help people overcome the crisis and the organization to overcome the crisis. So he put aside his personal plan to move on, and he persevered in that process of helping the people getting out of that crisis. He felt that it wasn't the right time to do it, so he didn't give up. When things became tougher, he actually persevered in that process despite having other opportunities out there. And it might have sounded like he lost an opportunity there to move on, having done his job, but the fact that he kept on going when things got tougher actually paid back eventually in the future, because people saw him as someone who you could rely on and someone who would give up easily. So for me, that's a good example of someone showing grit and perseverance even when things go tough.
On the opposite spectrum, I think we've seen a lot of our students and and colleagues that many times they establish themselves like a certain time to achieve whatever, right, to be promoted, and
Yeah.
then suddenly they are not promoted and they start to demotivate themselves, and they start actually being a little bit reckless about their work, and sometimes they eventually change or leave, abandon their own objectives and their own, initial plans, because they didn't get what they wanted in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the opposite of resilience, right? Is okay, I have an obstacle, I have a change in context, in plans, in whatever, and I kind of let go of my
Yeah.
initial
Exactly.
plans and
Yeah.
move on, right? And swipe,
Yeah.
or swipe. I don't know. I never know. So that's a little bit. On a personal note, actually, my father used to say to me, and was very rigid on that aspect. I used to, as young children, wanted to change sports every month almost, right? Because there's always a new thing, and we wanted to change. And my father said, no, you have to stick to 3 years in order to actually your learning curve to be on a point that you say, okay, you kind of achieve your well, at least a level of proficiency that allows you to say, okay, your return on your additional incremental return on learning is kind of achieving a plateau, so now you can move on. But before
Yeah.
3 years, he said, no
Yeah.
way. Okay,
And
no
that's a
way.
very good point. So I think your father was very wise. And going back to that example and others that I can refer to, that's exactly the point, right? You might plan for a certain time horizon, right? So 3, 4 years, I envision myself doing this. But what should drive you in your decision making, whether it's time to move on or not, is not so much whether the time has come, is more, am I still learning? Am I still evolving? Am I becoming better? Do I have sufficient challenge in where I am to in a few years look back and say, hey, that was fun, that was hard, and I learned along the way. And that's probably the driver of that you should use. And when you're making these decisions and feeling whether it's the right time or not, the time is about whether you're still learning, whether you're still growing, whether you're still contributing, rather than if you just stick to the plan as originally envisioned, because things might change. And you're very right. I mean, we are very much in this sort of, everything is kind of easily accessible today, right? At the click of a button, you can stream a movie and do this and reach out to people on the other side of the world. And we might tend to think that things just come somehow easy, and at the first resistance, we just should neglect it. And that's exactly the opposite. So it's, yes, flexible, yes, being malleable, but at the same time being resilient, and also being able to go deep into something.
Yeah,
And that's
close
where
the
you
cycle,
extract
right?
insightful learning, right? Because not everything is just at a click of a button.
Yeah, so perhaps closing the cycles is critical, right? Cycles
Yeah,
of learning, the cycles of
exactly.
whatever
exactly.
you're doing. Okay, so let's try to leave a couple of tips and hacks on how to be or how to train our resilience and our grit. Any suggestion on how to do it?
Well, I think that a key hack for me, a key important thing is whenever you start a project, that is you define your learning goals, right? Yes, you might set a time horizon, but that you stay, okay, what do I want to get from this? What do I want to learn from this? What do I want to work on? What do I want to see as something that I became better at the end of this experience, at the end of this sprint that I'm going to do maybe for the next 3 months? Because that will kind of give you a compass, right? When the time comes for you to decide whether it's time to continue or time to stop, you can go back and say, did I learn what I was supposed to learn? And that for me, it helps if you can define in advance of anything new you're starting, is what are the learning objectives here, both in terms of skills and in terms of knowledge. That for me would be an important hack. Now, maybe you have some other ideas as well yourself.
So what you're saying is define your cycles based on more learning
Yeah,
than on time, because time can stress you and
exactly.
create
But be
anxiety.
concrete about the learning objectives. Be very concrete. What do I want to get from this, right? As a learning process.
Yeah, of course. So in my point of view, it's also important to kind of balance your ambitions. Because if you put up your expectations too high, then it's probably that you're going to be frustrated, and your resilience will be absent. So I think expectations is also a way to hack your resilience.
Yeah,
As happiness is a difference between expectations and reality. So I think you can hack a little bit also your resilience on not raising too higher too high the standard, and I see a lot of that happening to students, because they think they are going to this company or that company. It's
yeah,
it's like an oasis, a golden
yeah,
nugget
yeah,
in the middle of the ocean, and suddenly then of course they get disappointed, and I think
yeah,
it's also a reason.
yeah,
So don't raise
yeah.
so high expectations in order to then be disappointed and
Absolutely. Yeah,
become
yeah.
not resilience, right?
Just a quick note there on that, so because one of the areas that we study in positive psychology is this idea of flow, right? And for you, when you are in a state of flow, you are fully engaged and motivated. One of the things that we know from that state of flow is that you have targets which are stretching and challenging, but not too much. Because if you set yourself overly stretched targets, you get anxious, and that anxiety can get in the way of performance. So to be in that channel of flow, you need to set targets, yes, and to stretch yourself, but not to the point where it breaks you. All right, it's just enough for you to achieve your next target, but they need to be somehow achievable, right? And that's very important. And then in light of that, one of the things we were just talking about it before, and you shared with me an example of that. The importance also of not being discouraged by feedback from others that might be overly critical. And especially if you're very young, you might feel very frustrated and sad and discouraged by negative feedback. And grit is also about still really persevering in light of critical feedback, despite the critical feedback, taking that as a learning, but not to be discouraged by it, which can be quite hard. But it's very important that you stay centered and then you keep on going for what you believe in.
So it's kind of in what relates to your career, to your life, don't let any bozo or idiot kill you, right? Don't let anyone from outside actually break your own journey, right? So that's very important. Also another thing, I think it's more than a hack. It's a don't do it. It's a fuck up, a mistake I always see. It's basically that the tendency that people have when things get tough, they go away. And I think this Tinder zapping mentality nowadays is becoming, a lot of, very common. Why? Because we have such, a lot of access to everything. So we kind of, being the role more of choosing. And if things doesn't relate to me, I choose something else. And I would like to actually bring a new perspective, which is, sometimes, if not many times, the thing you need the most is the thing you like the less. And so don't listen to the motivational and inspirational speakers saying things like follow your passion only, and dreams come true, etc. Because sometimes you have to eat the broccoli until the end, and that's kind of not only steak or fish, depends on what you like, but you also have to eat something that when we are children we don't like so much, which is the broccoli. So eating broccoli is very important for your growth. Learning to like is one key skill that we need. Of course, there is a balance between, of course, taking everything and be submissive, of course, versus actually eating a little bit of broccoli and training yourself to become more resilient and grit, because perhaps the learning curve is not completely done, and and you have to resist a little bit until you achieve that level of proficiency. If you change too early on, you will not explore that. You will not get into the curve.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing that we see a lot in when dealing with managers hiring younger people. I mean, they're fully on board when it comes to we need to provide purpose and impact and meaning, and they fully agree to that, and they are very much willing to create opportunities for that. But they are themselves also somehow frustrated when they see young people coming in through their doors, and after 3 months or 2 months or even just 2 weeks saying, I don't feel like my work has any impact, right? Without going through the whole learning curve of learning the skills and the knowledge and the craft of the job that you're doing, right? And if you're not willing to, as you say, eat the broccoli and go through that process, you won't be able to find the purpose and the impact and the meaning, right? And it's that combination. So it's not only idealism, it's also at the same time very much hardworking sort of commitment that you need. It's the combination of the two. If you're overly idealistic about your purpose, you will always be frustrated. And if you're only focused on the hard work, you will miss the inspiration. And it's the two. How do you go about it too?
Yeah, so there you go. I think resilience and grit as a key skill for the 22nd century career is really, really important to master. And I think we come up with a good ways to hack it, because it's not only a question of zapping and tindering across experiences, but it's much more taking the bullets until the end, because probably they will not kill you and they will make you stronger, right? So thank you very much. I think we have done a great job here.
Let's see what the other guys on the other side think of it.
Yeah, let's wait for another episode of Career 22.
All right.
Thank you
Take
very much.
care.
Bye. Take
Cheers,
care.
Miguel. Bye-bye.